Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to do a tier list over some of the best and worst UFC commentators in this current era, but I'm going to mix in some from a past era, and one from the very beginning, just so I can tell you how far we've come. Because in doing research for this, I have realized just how many commentators we have had, and whatever number you have in mind for how many we've had, trust me, it is more than that. I eventually had to narrow it down to the ones that we can agree are probably the best of them, and a few in from the middle, a few in from the end. And at the end of the day, trust me, we've come a long way. That being said, let's get started with good old Dan Hardy. Now, commentary-wise, it was nothing too bad. Okay, he ended up getting let go. I mean, it's not directly stated, however, it's pretty heavily implied that the straw that broke the camel's back was his little altercation that he had after that late stoppage at the Apex. I'll probably play a little clip of there. That little incident did not sit well with Dana White, and just so happened his contract for being a commentator mysteriously ended right after that situation. So I'm going to say those are connected. Dan Hardy, however, as far as like a commentary talent goes, he's pretty good. If we're going to rate him among ex-UFC fighters, he's probably middle. I would probably say middle. For anybody who thinks that's crazy and they're going to name Paul Felder, Daniel Cormier, trust me, doing research for this video, those are like the best of former fighters. Dan Hardy's a better commentator than Randy Couture, who didn't even make this list because I didn't have the heart to put him in D tier. Dan Hardy is probably going to go in a C tier. I'm probably going to say a high C tier. I'm going to be pretty hard on this one, just because this is a pretty hard concept to do a tier list over, because it's very subjective most of the time. Next one, we're going to do Goldberg. Another dude who was with the organization for a pretty hot minute. And then, contract end. Now, I'm going to say this right now. The UFC, how it ended its business arrangement with Goldberg, was pretty scummy, admittedly. It was with the company through the dark ages, before it was cool. And although had some pretty questionable commentary at times, like people think Joe Rogan is an expert of the sport when you compare him to Goldberg. Goldberg before Joe Rogan. Like, Joe Rogan's kind of become like the relatable person on the broadcast. Like the all-star lineup right now. Joe Rogan, Daniel Cormier, and Jon Anik. Jon Anik is your set dressing. He's the dude that's the entertaining one. Joe Rogan is the relatable one, and Daniel Cormier is the expert. Back in the day, Joe Rogan was the expert, and Goldberg was like your everyday dude. Like, that's how off he was. The UFC, how it ended, was not good, and overall, he was not bad. Outside of his calling of like the Ronda Rousey Misa Tate and other weird stuff that he did with some fighters. When I mean by weird, I mean like really bad commentary. I'm going to say probably a middle B tier when I start getting more people in here. Not bad, better than Dan Hardy, and better than who's going to be in D tier, you'll see. Joe Rogan. Listen, Joe Rogan's slowly becoming a casual fan. Make no mistake about it. And I am going to dock him a point for that. If we're going prime for prime, Joe Rogan probably is a S tier. Been around since near the beginning. He is probably the only commentator, or like the commentator that Dana White would fight for the most. Bro, they got a little bromance going on. Joe Rogan, I mean, like, you can't put him anything under A tier. Like, the fact is, for everything he's done for the organization, yeah, no, A tier. Like, great. Like, this would be our great, good, meh, bad. He's definitely a great commentator. Not our S tier just because he's not. You'll see in a moment. Laura Sanko. Okay. Laura Sanko. Commentary skills, not bad. I actually really like her when we do the Dana White Contender Series. I like that she's good on UFC Fight Nights. I'm just going to say it, numbered cards don't hit the same. I'm not the only person to say this. And it's not as bad as some people make it out to be. But if you have like a Leon Edwards head kick Kamaru Usman finish, I want Joe Rogan, Daniel Cormier, and Jon Anik. I want to see that booth reaction. And I'll just be frank with you, if that very same thing happened, I wouldn't want to look at the booth reaction as much. like the big moments of the sport, I don't think are gonna hit the same. Because we saw what happened in Sean Strickland versus Israel Adesanya. The knockdown that Strickland was able to get. It just didn't feel the same. Okay, like very subjective, but I know I'm not the only person that says this because a lot of people do not like Lorosenko commentating, and all I'm saying, trust me, she's not that bad. I think this is tough. She's either going to be very high C tier above Dan Hardy or just beneath Goldberg, just because Goldberg's kind of he's pretty good. I'm going to say middle B tier. I think middle B tier is a perfect place to put Lorosenko. Next up, John Gooden. Okay, I might have to move down Lorosenko. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to move her down. I'm going to say above Dan Hardy. John Gooden. This is probably the perfect example of a reason that I had to limit this list, because there's a lot of commentators that just did their job. John Gooden was one of those. He was with the UFC for a long time. But I'm going to be real with you. He was one of the first people that I forgot when I was making the first draft of this tier list. Like, John Gooden. He's just not super memorable. Like, Lorosenko is more memorable than John Gooden. Goldberg is far more recognizable than everybody that's going to be above him is a little bit more recognizable. And frankly, if it weren't for the memes, he would be at the same level as Dan Hardy. Dan Hardy is a bit more recognizable than John Gooden, despite John Gooden, without even a question of a doubt, is better at commentary. Smooth cadence, it just doesn't work well for MMA. I don't know what to say. He used to be a part of the commentary crew, and I think he still does it sometimes. I can't actually remember the last time he did it, but he still has a contract with the UFC. And all I'm going to say is, I'm going to say this is going to be our you can interchange him and Lorosenko. John Gooden is just not super memorable. Probably the most forgettable of all of them. Next up is Daniel Cormier. Okay, this is all I'm going to say. I'm okay with a bias in commentary if we have somebody else in the lineup that can offsuit that. When people bring up biased commentary, they bring up examples like Israel Adesanya versus Jan Blachowicz. That was probably one of the most one-sided commentary that just didn't fit the reality of the fight. Jan Blachowicz was winning just about every moment of that fight, aside from a few exchanges. But if you just listened to the commentary and you weren't watching the fight, you would think we were neck and neck going into the fifth, and they were going to give it to Israel Adesanya. That's bad commentary. And Daniel Cormier, okay, Joe Rogan, his bias is more obvious towards Israel Adesanya than Daniel Cormier's bias towards Islam Makhachev. Fighters are going to be biased. People want UFC fighters to be commentators. There's a lot of people that are lobbying that we want UFC fighters as judges, referees, commentators, sports analysts. Then they're going to be biased. The fact is MMA is probably one of the smallest sporting communities. There is no other sport in the world where you can go into an MMA gym today and train in the presence of professional athletes. That's not a thing in any other sport. MMA, that is most definitely a thing. So you're going to be biased. That's going to happen if you want MMA fighters to do it. And Daniel Cormier handles it probably some of the best outside of one other dude. I'm going to say Daniel Cormier is going to be above a Goldberg. Slightly. It's to the point that these are very interchangeable. I do believe he's better than Gooden. I believe he's better than Senko, therefore better than Hardy. Not as good as Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan brings out the best in Daniel Cormier. This is a good lineup, but by themselves, Joe Rogan is definitely better. Daniel Cormier, top of B tier. Next up, Paul Felder. He is the sleeper pick of this entire tier list. Paul Felder, people are pushing Dominic Cruz to become a full-time commentary broadcast team when we get rid of Joe Rogan eventually. I think they picked the wrong guy, frankly. I think Paul Felder is a better personality to do this. Look at this man and tell me he's not likable. Paul Felder's a G, man. Company dude. in his MMA career, fought a lot of fights on short notice just because he's a company man. And they treated him well. Kept a certain amount of brain cells. He can formulate a sentence better than some other commentators that were fighters. And those guys didn't even make the list. So I'm going to say Paul Felder, because he is the sleeper pick of this entire lineup. I'm going to say he is going to be beneath Joe Rogan. I really do believe we chose the wrong guy when we're saying Dominic Cruz is going to be the replacement for Joe Rogan. Pick Felder, dude. Felder is better than Dominic Cruz, personality-wise. Next up, Michael Bisping. Okay. I don't even know how this is going to come up. Michael Bisping just has mean commentary, dude. Like, it'll be like a straight war between featherweights, and Michael Bisping will watch it, and he'll be like, look at these two idiots, they're not even blocking. I know you don't hit hard, you're 145. Like, it'll be stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, Bisping, let's chill for a second. They've been fighting for 15 minutes. I think they can be exhausted. You in your MMA career didn't have the best cardio. Oh, and Michael Bisping and Dominic Cruz are both good commentators. You put them together, like, it either turns out really good or really bad because they constantly throw shots at each other. Because Dominic Cruz definitely has, like, the little man syndrome, but he's better than Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping has, I am bigger than you, therefore I'm better than you. And then you have, like, let's be real, Dominic Cruz has better fight IQ than Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping lost an eye. I think you lost half your brain cells, too. They're both entertaining, though. Like, Michael Bisping he's better than Dan Hardy. Better than Dan Hardy. A tiny bit better than Lorosenko. Okay? A tiny bit better than Lorosenko. I think Senko... no. I was going to say something... nice, but at the same time, I think Michael Bisping does beat her out. So, okay. Top of C tier, Michael Bisping. Top of B tier, Daniel Cormier. Yeah, I'm okay with this. Brennan Moreno. He did one event. I will never forget it. UFC Mexico Fight Night. When I tell you, that was one of the worst It's one of the worst commentary performances I've ever seen. And it hurts me because Brennan Moreno is such a good dude. If you've ever listened to Moreno speak, anybody with half a brain cell would have known this wasn't going to end well. And Moreno was set up. Moreno was fed to the wolves with this commentary job. I don't know what they were trying to do. I think they were just trying to, like, placate to a lot of, like, the Mexican fans, but, like, I think they were going to watch it anyways. The fact is just about everybody else had no clue what Moreno was trying to say. It's just, if you think Lorosenko's voice doesn't work well for those tough moments, like those big moments in MMA, Brennan Moreno will make you just mute the whole television. Like, it hurts me because he's a good dude and he's super likable. Whoever cleared him to do a commentary job needs to get fired. He did one event. And I remember, it was so memorable in my mind. Watch clips of his commentary that I had to remember to put him in D tier. That is how bad it was. Next up, John Anik. Enough with the negativity, to the positivity. John Anik, the GOAT. S tier. Okay? Like, if there's one commentator by himself, if there's one dude that could be just a one-man desk, it is John Anik. You want to get the dream lineup, and I did this for a reason. John Anik, best of S tier, best of them all. Joe Rogan, best of A tier. And Daniel Cormier, best of B tier. Get them all together. You have a lineup that I want to see for UFC 300. And I hope I see for UFC 300. John Anik, I don't even know. Like, if I had to, like, a stats for commentators, okay? We got John Anik, probably has good play-by-play. A good cadence of voice, a decent understanding of the sport. That's something, like, he doesn't talk about, like, the aspects of MMA like the other guys. Like, Daniel Cormier is your wrestler guy. Joe Rogan's your jiu-jitsu and a little bit of your striking. John Anik does understand it enough to explain it to somebody who is a casual fan. He is the stand-in for your casual fan if he needs to be. But he also, and that's something that he does better than any other person on this list and why he's justified in S tier, he just is good in those moments that you need him to. Like that's just facts. Like, his calls in Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman literally makes that moment better. There's so many instances where John Anik just, the little one-liners that he puts out, puts him above the rest. And when he's talking about custody battles between two women's fighters, it is so funny. I'm sorry. That, like, I was nice up until then. John Anik, I also love just how out of pocket he can be with some of the weird facts that he'll bring up. And stuff that really, dude, who are you kidnapping to get this information? Yeah, no, John Anik S tier. Dominic Cruz. I think it would be blasphemy to put him under Goldberg and Gooden. I do believe Cruz is better than Michael Bisping and Lorosenko. The one thing I do respect about Dominic Cruz and why he deserves that middle B tier, and I think he will eventually, at his very best, overtakes Daniel Cormier. One thing I think he does very well is I think he researches better than any other person on this list. He does. If Joe Rogan wasn't such a good personality for the sport, I think he would be able to break into this A tier. And honestly, you can make that argument. Like, people at the tops of these tiers, you can make this argument. But Dominic Cruz, memorable moments. However, I'm just going to say it. He goes in B tier because of the Conor McGregor versus Khabib Nurmagomedov fight. It is that bad. If you're going to say that it's part of the game plan of Conor McGregor to get ground and pounded for an entire round and say, oh, he's tiring him out now, you understand you've just been kicked from A tier for the next 100 events. Okay? Like, we can talk again halfway till UFC 400, and then we can probably move you up. I do believe he is their replacement for Joe Rogan because I think he does better research than any other commentator. I do believe that. But to round out this entire tier list, and if you think this is a bad placement, if you think people should go lower, if you're going to say, oh, Daniel Cormier's biased, he's not. If you're going to say all that, let's bring it back to UFC 1. Bill Wallace. D tier. Absolute D tier, okay? The only thing that he has going for him is he has a decent voice. He has a better voice than Moreno. That is the only thing that he has. IQ of the sport, just not there. Like, he was like a kickboxing world champion, but it just wasn't there. Is the only commentator in the history of the sport to say the name wrong. Yup, that clip of the Ultimate Fighting Challenge comes from Bill Wallace at UFC 1. That is one reason that he was never invited back. Bro did not care. Burping in the middle of saying the name of the arena. The dude did not care for this gig. And part of me doesn't blame him, because who would have thought we would have blown up here? Bill Wallace was there for a paycheck. It sewed. Not passionate about the sport. Didn't even say the name right. And if you watch UFC 1's commentary, it reminds you just how good we are today. And I can say that for Bellator and ONE FC. The fact is our commentary squad is so much better than any other sport. I will say that right now. Michael Bisping, Lorosenko, and Dominic Cruz, no diff any other commentary crew for ONE FC, Bellator, PF. It's not even a question. I think I did pretty well on here. John Anik is your undisputed S tier. Joe Rogan makes it just because of how long he's been around. The reason I can't put him in S tier, I just can't do it, is I don't think he does a lot of research for prelims. I just don't think he does. I do believe he waits for like Daniel Cormier and John Anik to say the name of the fighter so he knows how to pronounce it, and then he'll say it. Because he has pronounced the name of fighters wrong. And to be fair, it is their moment. Like, you are there to let the fans know about them, and if you're not saying their name right, I'm sorry, I can't put you in S tier. But Personality-wise, he probably has the best personality. He just does. Paul Felder, other A tier. Daniel Cormier barely misses it. I think I did well. Moreno and Bill Wallace are the worst commentators we've ever had. Frankly. Tell me what you think about this tier list in the comment section below. And I think this turned out pretty well. Thank you guys for watching. Adios, guys.